Please join me in welcoming to the stage Chuck Robbins, Chair and Chief Executive Officer of Cisco, and Alexandr Wang, Founder and CEO of Scale AI.
Chuck, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. I feel quite intimidated by this crowd.
Well, I think one of the big questions in the entire industry is obviously there's a lot of investment into AI, but the monetization has been slow. I think this year, depending on how exactly you count it, like something like $200 billion going into the models, maybe $5 to $10 billion of above the model revenue coming out of the model. So there's this big question around: are the models overhyped? Why is the adoption slow? Are we going to see a lot of is it just delayed? So Chuck, as the CEO of Cisco, you talk to many of your clients, some of the largest enterprises in the world constantly, and you're also the chairman of the Business Roundtable. Mm-hmm. So you talk more than probably anyone in the world constantly to the
It's very tiring, by the way.
The CEOs of all the leading organizations in the world. So what are you hearing right now? Like what do you hear from CEOs? How excited are they about the technology? Do they think it's overhyped? What do they wish they could get? Like what are you hearing?
Look, first of all, thanks for having us here, and G2's been here, I think, yesterday as well. I got in late last night, but it's been great sitting in this morning, so thank you, and congratulations on your success and our partnership. I think, look, they are very excited about it. The enterprise CEOs they're excited by it, they're scared by it, they're confused by it, they're all the above. And I think that we'll talk about later, but if you think about the original cloud transition that occurred, every boardroom and every CEO on the planet was saying, they just all believed that we need to get to the cloud. We don't know why, but everybody's doing it, so let's go. And I literally had CIOs at the time telling me that they had deployed Microsoft 365 just to get their CEOs off their back. I think with this transition, it's a little different in that they understand the risk, and they're still concerned about the unintended consequences of deploying this too rapidly. And so I think they're all using it, and they're all trying it. They're all using it in very cautionary ways right now. But I don't think it's overhyped. I think the desire by the customer, the aspirations of the customer, and where we're going to land, and you and I talked about this earlier this morning, whether it's 25, 26, whenever this stuff really goes, it's going to be one of those things that when it goes, it's going to explode. And I think it's going to require policy issues like what we heard earlier this morning have to be resolved. I think the security issues have to be resolved. The simplification of the infrastructure required and the better understanding of what does my technology infrastructure even need to look like, and can I absorb it? I think they're trying to figure that part out. So I think there's a lot of dependencies that they're working on right now to actually be ready to take advantage of the great technology that so many of you in this room have built.
When you look at so if you think about CEOs as like, on a spectrum of, people who are adopting it almost without abandon and like diving headfirst versus the CEOs who are sort of taking more of a pause and kind of very cautious about the risk, like where would you paint most of the CEOs on that spectrum, and what are the things that you see in the ones on this side of the spectrum versus the ones on the other side?
Less regulation on this side. So the ones who are very cautious are in highly regulated. They want to use it probably more than anybody else, but they're in regulated industries because the industries are so critical to the country. And so I think that and every CEO is scared of being left behind on this. They are frightened to death that their competitor is going to come out with something on Tuesday that they had no idea their team missed, and they're going to be in big trouble. So that's what they're motivated by fear. And I think that so what everybody's doing right now is everybody's looking at the agent issue that you talked about earlier. Customer service is just one that's universal across. Everybody in this room knows that. That's a big one that everybody wants to deploy. They see high return. The only risk they see is the risk of saying something really stupid to a customer, right? Or missing something completely with one of your interactions with a customer. And I think the naivety of the CEOs are just leading them to be more cautious. And as you and I spoke earlier, I think one of the things we can do at Business Roundtable, we engage a lot with private sector experts and government experts. And we do a series of dinners for our members. And I think getting people like you all, a lot of people in this room, to host some of these dinners with these CEOs will be very helpful to just help them continue to learn and continue to understand why they should feel more comfortable about this. And candidly, how people in this room can help them actually make the progress they need to make in a way that makes them feel good about what they're doing.
Yeah. How are you all thinking about it at Cisco? So where are you adopting AI internally? And where are you looking to help your customers with AI?
Yeah, I think if I sum up what we're focused on, we're engaged in the policy discussions that were highlighted earlier today, both on a global geopolitical basis. I was in the Middle East 2 weeks ago, so I was in the middle of the conversations that they were discussing earlier. Being the BRT chair, we're obviously deeply involved in Washington, and Cisco is deeply involved in Washington and has been for a very long time. So the policy side is one of it. The security side of it is another one that's super important. In fact, one of our partnership elements that we're working on with you is some emerging security technology that we think we can bring forward that will actually help the enterprise CEOs feel better about what they're able to do. So obviously we're working on that area, not only around helping secure and helping create more confidence in the use of the models, but also just leveraging AI to actually combat the bad actors around the world, because we know how good they're becoming, and unfortunately with these tools they're becoming even more effective. And I think that we all understand that if we don't use AI more effectively to correlate disparate threats that are happening across various aspects of the infrastructure that our customers have, we'll lose over time. So the second area is security. The third is just fundamental infrastructure. We're deployed in 3 of the 4 top web scale players as the connectivity layer underneath these training models, and we design our own silicon, and we continue to design silicon for iterations, and there's a lot of requirements and a lot of rapid transition. You've heard Jensen talk about the cycle time on silicon these days is incredible. And then the fourth is really helping our enterprise customers, in addition to what we're doing internally, and I'll talk about that in a moment. But I think the enterprise, we're building an integrated tech stack to help them deploy AI apps a little more effectively and more rapidly, because they don't know what they need. And we have this AI readiness index that we do. It's just basically a survey of customers to understand how they're feeling about it. And 2 years in a row, they're only like 13-14% of the customers feel like they're even ready. They just don't know what they need to do. And I think our job should be to help them actually get ready and become more comfortable deploying these applications.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you navigated this, with the cloud migration, or the sort of like large scale cloud migrations and data transformations in that era, and saw that, basically that entire thing play out, from when it was buzzword to actual implementation to the challenges to ultimately, getting out there. And even, we were talking earlier this morning, it's like, it's still not done. Yeah. What do you think are the parallels between this AI transformation and this sort of last major tech transition in the enterprise, and how do you think we make it go more smoothly?
Well, you're showing your age, because we didn't do a very good job actually navigating the cloud transition. There's some friends of mine over here who would make that clear. But I think in this case, I think we're much more prepared for it. But I think at that point there was a general lack of understanding of what was going on, and that's consistent here. There's still a general lack of understanding with CEOs and with executive teams around what's really happening behind the curtain, and that makes them nervous. I think the positive side of it is that they've gone through the cloud transition. They've learned that there's logic behind migrating a number of workloads to the cloud, and then there's logic in figuring out what you want to run in your private data centers, and thinking about it more holistically as opposed to just having this mass run. And I think that's one of the things that's making them a little more cautious. I was with a CIO last week of probably a Fortune 25 company, and he said to me, my CEO told me last week, stop coming and telling me that you can gain 20% productivity using these tools unless you're ready to take your head count down by 20%. So, I mean, those are the real discussions that are happening. It sounds great, but the reality is I got to actually realize that benefit. And I think getting to some of that is what's going to be really important. And I think the cloud transition, I think what they learned is everything isn't better by moving it to the cloud. A lot of stuff is much better, but everything's not better. And I think they're trying to navigate that as well right now. But I do think security today is a much bigger issue relative to what we're talking about than they contemplated when the cloud. I'm not saying they were right, but I think they were less concerned about security in the original cloud transition than they are today about this transition.
Yeah, cybersecurity is a topic that always comes up whenever we chat. Later on in the program, we have this company Expo, which has demonstrated the first AI penetration tester or sort of hacker of web apps, which will be they'll present that. It's quite exciting. But I feel like every time we talk, there's some new major hacking that you all and Cisco have to get in and help with. And I was at Nat and I were at dinner the other day with somebody who had said that there's major hacking in North Dakota that happened because there was a foreign adversary that hacked into PowerSchool, which is literally like a school student management system, to get the credentials of the parents to then hack into a missile defense system in North Dakota to then, it was like this very sophisticated attack. You all see this stuff on the daily. What is your current prognosis in general about cybersecurity, and how do you think we actually, stay ahead of these major adversaries?
Well, I think you nailed it. I think increasingly, and again, I think most people in this room are aware that the tactics have shifted to stealing credentials and going in very naturally, and you don't necessarily know they're in because you're not looking for an intrusive event. You're actually now having to try to figure out when normal traffic patterns actually are an adversary as opposed to someone that you want to have access. And the problem is they're coming in and then they're positioning capabilities that they can leverage later. I think there's been documents published about concerns around U.S. critical infrastructure and how much of this may have occurred already. There have been some articles recently about some of the telcos in the U.S. with similar things happening. And I think that I think they've gotten very smart, and they're actually taking advantage of our lack of hygiene. And I thought it was great in the first panel today, the discussion, or second panel, I guess, on around lazy models. And I think the laziness that occurs in managing and securing our own IT infrastructure across the customer base is pretty severe. And if we really understood how exposed we are due to customers running technology, it's not just ours, technology that is past last day of support, technology that has known vulnerabilities where security patches have been deployed and briefings have been deployed that customers haven't actually gone out and actually done, the risks are super high. And our customers realize this, the cost of solving that is very high. And so we have to help them prioritize and actually work their way through those issues. And I think the risk of what we're talking about here today, given that they know they have those kinds of exposures, what do they open up by deploying these models or applications based on these models and actually beginning to automate responses relative to, let's say they're running an inference app that's both leveraging both their data and foundational model data, and then somehow some security breach occurs that they're not aware of that actually influences the behavior of the model. Those are the kinds of things they're really concerned about, that they just don't understand how I'm going to stop that. What's the answer there? And I think we have to collectively help them do that.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of issues.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty scary. It's we have all this legacy infrastructure. The updates aren't happening fast enough, and meanwhile you have AI cyber attackers that are just going to, potentially wreak havoc on all of it.
Yeah. And the old adage, they just have to be right once. I mean, and so I think the real issue is how do we help customers begin to move in that direction so that they can begin to take advantage of these technologies? And then again, how do we as an industry, or how do you all as an industry, how do we leverage the technology? Maybe we need to spend more time using this or thinking about how we use this particular technology to defend against the bad actors using the same technology. I think that's something that we should probably spend more time talking about.
Yeah. I want to kind of change gears back to, as you were talking about, Cisco's own adoption of AI into its business.
Yep.
What have you seen there? What are the sort of best practices that you've observed and you tell your customers about?
Well, so we're doing these things that you would expect. We're using it for coding. We're using it for workstream automation. We're using it in customer service. I think we have 20 or 30% of our customer service cases now have some element of AI that's involved in the process. So I think that's all happening. I think we're trying to actually do exactly what we've just been talking about, is how do we use Cisco as customer zero for the appropriate infrastructure and the appropriate security for this, because we are actually a target every day, as most of you are as well, for international actors, state actors, and others that when you go out and talk about your capabilities as an enterprise security company, everybody wants to prove you wrong. And so we're leveraging that. We work closely with lots of folks in this room as well as you all to actually really try to become the example for how our customers can think about this. And so right now we have a series of announcements around enterprise technology to really help our customers over the next, say, 12 months of different capabilities that are all tied to sort of an end-state architecture that we're going to be announcing soon that we think will align with what enterprises are going to drive. And we're actually deploying all of that first internally so that we can then help our customers do the same. And we're trying to build capabilities right now where we can go in and address the first issue, which is the whole security posture, which is just going to continue to be a blocking factor relative to their deployment of these technologies. So we need to figure out how we solve it so we can help the customer solve it.
Yeah, and I think one of the underrated things about Cisco's position that people don't often recognize is you all have an entire ecosystem of products that encompass a reasonably 360 view of these customers. You have Splunk, so you have as much data as you could possibly imagine about their deployments and their infrastructure and logs of all this happening. You have the networking infrastructure that's deployed. You have this marriage of great software capabilities as well as hardware that's deployed in a lot of these systems. So you have this sort of 360 ecosystem within your customers that enables you to do, particularly for cybersecurity as well as a lot of the network optimization stuff we were talking about, some pretty special things.
Yeah, it's we think that we acquired Splunk this year, and really if you take the log data and the other data that they have historically had in Splunk, and you marry that with the insights that we see from our customers actually see leveraging the network, every packet that goes. I mean, we should see everything. We should see more than anybody else, and I don't mean we, but our customers should, using our technology. And when you bring that together with capabilities like Thousand Eyes and capabilities like Talos, which is one of the most underappreciated threat intelligence groups, I think, out there today, seeing billions of threats every day, and basically putting high fidelity filters on that data and then putting it into the Splunk platform so that customers can see that. We think a combination of that. The other two things that we have that I think are helpful in this whole discussion, one is we have a global ecosystem that works with us. We go to market completely through partners around the world. 90% of our business goes through our partner community, so we have a multiplicative factor of how as we determine how we can solve these problems for enterprises, we can actually scale those capabilities quite effectively around the world. I think we have 500,000 or 600,000 humans that wake up every day and represent our technology on a global basis. And then I think we have...
That's insane, by the way, 500,000 humans that...
It is,
yeah.
and you guys will just replace them all, so we're just waiting for that to happen. And then we can have more than 500,000. But the other advantage I think we have is we're viewed sort of neutrally around the world from a political perspective, and so in a policy perspective. So we're deeply engaged with governments all around the world, and I think that we can play a role there in helping advance the discussions. And I thought the conversation Jacob and Ben were having up here earlier was quite fascinating, because I was sitting in the middle of those very discussions in the Middle East 2 weeks ago. So it's always interesting to come back and have those discussions back here. But I think the technology architecture footprint, we have a unique position in that as long as all of our technology is working properly, you don't think about us very often. And so it's one of those things that if you don't hear our name, then things are good and everything's quiet, and that's a good thing. But there's a lot of, we do believe that there's a lot of insights, observability, and security capabilities that we can bring to bear as it relates to customers deploying the technology that we're talking about today.
Yeah, and I think that's what's exciting about like our partnership, frankly, is that you all, going back to one of the slides from my presentation, so much data out there is just locked into these private silos, and you all are the sort of the governors of a huge amount of that private data, and the sort of as we've been like jumping into it together, as we're working with G2 on your team to look at all the opportunities. I mean, there's just like an immense amount of real opportunity that you all have due to the data gravity of your platform.
And if you look at some of the issues we're talking about, I mean, you had 3 pillars up, one of which was data, and some of that is, I mean, obviously a lot of that is proprietary customer data, intellectual property data that every organization has, that they're really, they're trying to figure out how do I meld this together with the data in these foundational models to derive value, and I think that's what everybody's trying to help them do. But also then in their infrastructure, understanding what's going on is where we can help them a great deal. And we talk a lot about the cybersecurity issue. Is we've always said historically it's a data problem. Cybersecurity is a data game. And I think now it's a data and AI game. I mean, that's how you're going to solve this thing for our customers. And we think we have a significant role to play. And obviously our partnership with you guys is playing a big part of that.
Yeah. I want to spend some time actually on the policy conversation, because, you have a split role. I think one, obviously, chairman of the Business Roundtable. Yeah. You sort of there is the business community of all these American enterprises, and how are we pulling that together? And then Cisco. One of the things that I didn't appreciate until we really sat down is whenever an international country needs to set up their systems, they give you're one of the first calls they give, because they have to set up all the networking architecture. They have to, they have to really start from the ground up to get this stuff built out. And so, obviously the conversation that just happened around the Middle East, or in general, sort of like the sovereignty position of AI, and the U.S. obviously has a strong perspective on that. I mean, what do you think about how about just the AI policies in general? Like, how do we thread that needle, and also, the sort of international element of this technology?
I think, first of all, it's always easy to be critical and negative about policy. And I think it's important to recognize in this particular instance, I believe, both this community has done a much better job of engaging Washington and really trying to be a part of the solution. So I applaud you for that. I think it's unique in our history. I think that... I think Ben and Jacob gave you great examples of where there's great work going on in Washington around this topic. Again, it's easy to be critical, but in this case, I think when you contemplate the complexity and the speed at which all this technology is moving, and all of you spend every day and night, because you sleep like 2 hours, best I can tell, You spend every day and every night keeping up with all the changes and driving a lot of the changes. I mean, you all are the architects of a lot of this change, and there's got to be some sympathetic understanding of the complexity that lives in the U.S. government of trying to keep up with it as well as regulate it in a responsible way that doesn't hamper innovation. And I do believe in Washington those two things are very top of mind for every lawmaker. I haven't had one conversation where those two haven't come together because they want to regulate it efficiently and as thinly as possible so that they don't get in the way of everybody in this room continue to do more and more innovation. I think that they should be applauded for how they're doing it right now, to be honest with you, as opposed to how it may be happening in other parts of the world. So that's one thing. And I think that you all have to stay engaged there, keep interacting, and I have been quite amazed with you at your age, to be honest, and your understanding of Washington, your ability to navigate Washington, and the respect that you have and others in this room. So kudos for that. I think when you go outside the U.S., you're right. When you go into particularly developing countries, the first thing they want to do is connect all their citizens. So whether it's going into India and building the geo network with Reliance and helping connect villages all around India to create opportunity and to create this inclusive economy, I think that we are deeply involved. But we all know, and I thought this was a really interesting part of Ben and Jacob's conversation, is this balance that we're having to strike right now of wanting to embrace and create an ecosystem with our allies at a time where nationalism and the national requirements that are coming at us and other companies relative to doing business around the world are just increasing. And, obviously with the election coming up, that could go in a lot of different directions depending on what happens after the election. But it's something that we spend a lot of time on. And I think that I think it's really important for the U.S. to find a way to thread that needle where we're keeping our allies close, we're keeping them working with us, we're keeping them on our technology without becoming dependent to the point that was made earlier, as well as without them actually moving ahead of us. And I think that's a really complicated thing to do, but I think so far the government's doing a pretty good job.
Yeah. I think it'd be good to close on where we started, which is on the enterprise and on the global CEO community. And, what we've seen among the hyperscaler, tech companies is that they've basically, AI has been the number one thing they're spending money on. They're spending tens of billions of dollars on it. And for now, Wall Street is, seemingly fine with it and all cool with it. How do you think this plays out with other enterprises like, financial services companies or telcos or life sciences companies? Like, do you think that there are, again, all these people personally, other CEOs are going to say, hey, AI has to be the thing I like, has to be my biggest expenditure, my biggest investment, or do you think it'll be a bit more tepid?
No, I think it is. I think what's happened is the enterprise has set money aside for AI, and then they haven't known what to do with it. And so last quarter, as an example, we heard the first customers who have said, I'm taking the AI money that I had set aside, and I'm simply using it to update my infrastructure to be prepared for whatever my AI outcomes ultimately look like. But I'm telling you, it's going to take off. We're in the Middle East, and I won't be able to keep too much of a secret about which customer this was, but a very large oil and gas customer.
A handful of those, but yeah.
They have these incredible experienced engineers that when you go along a pipeline or any industrial part of their infrastructure, they can literally listen to audible sounds that the compressors are making or other pieces of equipment are making, and they go, you know what? Probably in 30 days that's going to fail, right? And if you think about the power of taking your technology and actually creating a model where they can train a model to do that in an automated way so that they don't have to deploy humans out there to listen to that, and the efficiency and the return that they get on that. And that's just like one small use case of what they're thinking about. And you look at healthcare and what's happening there with taking the capabilities of some of the finest, cancer centers in the world and deploying how they think about technology through a model to secondary healthcare. I mean, these things are monumental. And so I think it's going to happen. It's going to happen. And I do believe there are going to be these seminal moments where we have a breakthrough in how we help these customers feel good about their security posture. We're going to have breakthrough moments where they feel good about the level of accuracy and what you all are delivering to them through these models. And I think just be ready, because when that happens, it's going to explode. It really is.
Yeah. The way you describe the oil and gas engineer listening to the pipeline is how I imagine John Schulman is when watching the outputs of an experiment, and can just sort of sense sense what's going wrong with the model. This was really amazing, Chuck. Thanks so much for thanks for being here, and excited for this moment of enterprise explosion that we're all looking forward to.
It's going to happen. Thank you all.